everybody. Anna Sabranowitz here, and today I have a special guest for you. His name is Bryan Jones, and he is the mastermind, the magic behind eLearningArt. And this is the best bio ever because it's so short, and I'll make him do all the work. So he's an accidental instructional designer, graphic designer, and storyteller. So a perfect combo there. And also, he's an intentional entrepreneur. So, Bryan, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I think I'm probably like most people in the e-learning space that stumbled into it. So no formal instructional design training, no formal graphic design training, but tasked with having to create training, and that's a big challenge.
Yeah. So, okay. So tell us how you got started in this space. I mean, other than accidentally, and then just, what drives you now? Why are you still doing this? I'm assuming you've done it for couple of years now.
Yeah, it was actually my first job out of college back in 2000. I was not looking for an e-learning or instructional design job. I was looking for a job in technology. Dot-com bubble had burst. It was donezo. There weren't many jobs to be had. A company called SmartForce, which is now Skillsoft, was hiring back then, and I started first as a simulation developer, like soft skills simulation developer, hardcore scenario sort of stuff. But didn't have any training going into that. And that actually was my training with them for, it was either 3 or 6 months before I moved into their services group and got thrown in as like a junior project manager, instructional designer type to help like Fortune 5,000, Fortune 1,000 companies build their training programs out.
Wow.
So I wasn't seeking it, but I ended up in a role where I was having to build that stuff every day. And actually it still shapes a lot of my approach, the scenario-based approach, and that's how we connected, was over scenarios. And so that's generally how I got into the field. The origin story for eLearningArt is a little different. I had gone back to graduate school and was running a startup during business school, and pulled the plug on that and needed to find some way to make money. And so I went back to my bread and butter, which was e-learning, started doing some consulting work around that, and really struggled to find the images that I needed to build training. And that was I stayed up like before a client meeting, like 8 hours searching. I think it was iStock Photo or one of the big stock photo sites. Couldn't find what I needed, had to clip out the background myself, was super embarrassed by what I was presenting, and told myself, never again would I fall into that. So I started building a library of assets, of people cutouts, of templates to help people like me build better e-learning faster, and built my dream library and launched it with very little, really to solve my own problem. And it's grown since then. I've been doing that for 10 years, which kind of blows my mind.
And I have to say, full disclosure, I'm a full paying customer for years now because I find it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an amazing resource. And I'll actually share some. I don't just use your site for e-learning. I use it for my presentations as well, because I find it just enhances everything I do. So that'll be cool to look at a little bit later on. Cool. Okay, so for those who don't know, like if you were to just say, what's eLearningArt about? What is it? What would you say that it is? How would you describe it?
Sure. I'd say that it's an image and template library for people who are building corporate training, e-learning presentations. And I'd say what's different about it is it's really set up for storytelling and scenarios. So if you are on a big stock photo site, there are 50 million images, but you can find the one perfect marketing image. But what you can't find is a series of images to tell us a story or to build a scenario. And even if you found a couple of the images with the two same models in it, you can't control everything. So the concept behind eLearningArt is breaking assets apart. Right, so it's this character cutouts. So there's the Anna pack that'll have 250 poses of you, with the backgrounds cut out in a bunch of different angles, talking, listening, angry, happy, sad. And then there's the Bryan pack, has just as many images, and then you mix and match to create your own scenes. And the interesting thing with that is you can pick your character for your story or your scenario, and then build the scene that you want much faster than you could ever sort through 50 million images to find not what you're looking for. So that's the bulk of the library. I think we have like 50,000 character cutouts images now. And I think I launched it with like 150. So it's grown a lot over the last decade. But I'd say that's what differentiates it.
Yeah, I 1000% agree. I think what's really cool is that even looking at when you get into the site, looking at individual people, you can almost build a story around them, which I love. But I wanted to get more into the idea behind using people in learning and using why it's a good idea, what takes, let's say, I mean, I'm a proponent always of, if you have a good structure for a scenario, you can run it on sticky notes, right?
Yep.
That framework needs to be there, but there's something about people.
Yeah. Well, when you're talking about training and training somebody, the idea is improved performance. It's about somebody doing something, a person doing something, right? Differently.
I hope so.
So when you're getting down to, it's not just facts or process or whatever. It's about a person actually doing something. So that person, in incorporating a person into it, lets you in the two different ways we talked about. You can tell a story about that person, about what they're doing, and taking them through that. And you can also build scenarios around that as well. So tying it into the person and what that person is doing, and then using images of people in that story, in that scenario, is what really brings it out. I mean, like a good example, something you would think of not having any people in it might be like software training. And like the worst is software simulations, where it's like 2 hours of clicking through software simulations, click here, no, yes, no, yes. Instead, if you flip that around into a story about a customer, and then about the person who's having to let's say it's customer service, and then about the person who's having to deal with that customer either live or it could be on their computer, and what they're logging in the system. But now you have two people and you have the story, and it's the problem they're trying to solve. You take like a real world event and you use that to string through the software training. Like, here was a problem that was run into, and here was the impact. But instead of let's list every feature of the software, you take like a real use case and walk it through. And the pictures of the people let you do that. Represent the customer, represent your potential agent, represent a story, represent a scenario, and pull it all together.
I think that's a critical point you just made. The idea of almost like personalizing this experience, because I think that a lot of training focuses so much, well, not all of it, but there are training that focuses so much on the software aspect without saying, why am I really doing all of this? What's the meaning?
Yeah.
And we get meaning through stories and people, and that's why we do all these things, right? So yeah, I love that concept. Now, okay, so it's kind of weird because I think that if you look at stock sites and things like that, you'll see a lot of either fabulous looking people, women laughing at salads. There's a lot of
yeah, I love the memes. There's memes about that. You can find thousands of those photos.
I don't understand, right? But it's like this. It's weird to me because you're capturing nuance of facial expressions and movements and things like that, and it seems like for some reason the stock photography is focused on the ideal but also the extreme. So so tell me more why you chose to go this way.
Well, so I think there's two things. I think you have you're not really relating to that person's real world environment if like let's say you're doing some sort of field worker training, right? Like some industrial type of training, and it's like some super studly dude and some really, really attractive woman, where they, the person in it, let's say they're sitting in a room training, or they're looking around their job site, looking left, looking right. Like, these people don't look like models. I don't relate to that. This is ridiculous. I think it be more normal people, and it's a range. And then from the emotion standpoint, it's different what stock photos are trying to capture. They're looking for that one perfect photo, not the sequence of photos. So I think I have I'll try to pull it up and maybe we can link to it if I can find it. But I have one. I get complaints too about things being extreme. Like, oh my gosh, this person looks so angry. They would never be that angry in the real world. Well, one, like something over the top is okay from a visual story standpoint, but also you need to dial it back and say, I have this graphic that's like degrees of anger. And I have the extreme, like, oh, you're fired sort of
Which
photos,
happens.
but you can dial it back all the way to like a frustrated look. Yeah, it does. And I think you need that, but you need the range. And so that's the nuance. So I think I have like 6 or 8 photos in that sequence where it's like they're slightly, oh, I'm seeing an internet connection is unstable. You still hear me?
Yeah.
We
Yes.
good?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I don't know what that was. Great. Yeah, so the range being like slightly frustrated, a little bit angry, like, and you can dial it up and use that in the story and the way that you're telling it. And it's nice to have that range. And it didn't always. That range has expanded because of people like you requesting all the in-betweens, and it's a good thing. So the first series of images that I launched had like 75 characters in a pack for business casual, and now the new ones have like 250. I only had like 1 talking, 1 listening, 1 angry, and then all of this has turned into how do you sequence that. So for building a conversation, you need probably 4 or 5 talking poses, 4 or 5 listening poses, and then ranges of emotions that are like reaction shots as well.
Yeah. No, it's, and one of the things I find is that when you use so I design scenarios sometimes using, let's say, Branchtrack. And
Mm-hmm.
Branchtrack is basically just branching software. And they have, one of the things that I find is they have this, not only do they have, let's say, 5 characters or 5 character poses, but they also have them corresponding to like a face that's supposed to represent your emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I tested it with, I happened to be testing it with university students, they, regardless of what was said on the screen, they were very sensitive to the kind of expression that a person had. And so it's to me, it's kind of funny how we, like, there's this world of where we perceive, that how you read people, right? It's like 80% body language and the rest is talking, and how we
and
really,
and instantaneous too from a facial
right.
expression. Like you don't even realize it, but in just a millisecond, when you see somebody's facial expression, you have a sense for what their mood is.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So and it's kind of funny. I remember years back, I was at this, oh yeah, it was like a science world kind of thing, but it was for adults.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't let the children in that time. And what they had is this really cool app. And the app was it was flashes of somebody's eyes. And you basically were supposed to, like, in a second, decide angry, sad, happy,
Yeah.
whatever. So one of the things, when you're working with, let's say, in customer service or working with people, one of the things that will distinguish you as a better communicator is how quickly you're able to perceive, like you said, the milliseconds of when you see somebody's face, are they angry or sad? And I find that even when you're doing designing scenarios, there's these moments where you actually don't even need to tell people, if you have the right characters, you don't even need to tell people what the outcome is. You can just swap the character to look a certain way to help
Yeah.
them build those skills.
Yeah, I agree. That's that reaction shot visual storytelling element. That's awesome.
So you can you tell us a little bit about, because I don't think people understand the fact that you're still behind the process of capturing and directing all of
Yeah.
the masterpiece that's
Yeah.
online, because
I mean,
it looks like a lot of work, right? Still, sorry, I cut out there. Yeah,
yeah,
still,
that's
just
okay.
how are you doing that, and why, how are you directing those things,
Sure. Well, so,
those photo shoots?
yeah. Yeah, so I've directed every photo shoot. I tried it out where it was one shoot where I let somebody direct it, and I was there watching. I just let him run it for like just for 1 character or 2 characters. And he probably could have gotten there to the point of being able to do that, but it's still something that I hold so closely because of capturing that nuance. And I've done it enough times now where I know when the flash goes off without having to even look at the finished photo if I got what I want, and a process that way. So it's still so important to me to get those images right. And it's not like I'm doing 8 hours a day every day photo shoots. It's still manageable for me to do that, but certainly the process has evolved. Before, it was me posting. When I first launched, it was a photographer in a studio I found on Craigslist and models I found on Craigslist, and that was a disaster. I mean, now I have a staffing agency that works on that for me, finds the right people. I get the headshots ahead of time. And so that all is much better. It was a disaster trying to do it, to start this thing and manage everything myself. But yeah, still directing the photo shoots. Now you're happy, now you're angry. And I know the cues that get people to do it the right way too. And every model's a little bit different. Some of them like get it right away, and some of them it's a struggle and you have to work with them to get it out of them. But I still enjoy it. Those are long, grueling days when I'm doing it, but I feel really proud of the way that the product turns out.
So, do you have a preference for live versus drawn, like, or and like the animation comic book style versus reality?
Sure. I mean, obviously, I value the people cutouts a lot, and that's what I built out to solve my own problems. And there's a thing called the uncanny valley. If people are wondering what's better for learning or what do people like better, the answer is you can go either with illustrations or you can go with or you can go with realistic. But there's this study where I think it was in video games, when you got a real person, when you started to blur the line where the real person wasn't quite right, it creeps people out. And that doesn't work really well. But if you go with something that's clearly illustrated or clearly a person, you're good to go. And it's that same sort of thing, like when you look at like an AI fake person robot sort of thing, there's just like something creepy about it that as humans we pick up on and it bothers us. So so in terms of what's better, I think you can go either way. What I would say is I usually default towards people cutouts when I have the sets. What I'll tell people when they're asking about the eLearningArt library is like, you need to think about what industry you're in and what sort of training you're trying to build. The extreme example I give is like if you're trying to build like astronaut training, I don't have pictures of everyone wearing the right astronaut gear doing all the stuff. Like that's too specialized. But within like normal business, medical sort of settings, I feel comfortable with it. But and then some industrial as well, but you're going to have to do some mixing and matching. Like if you're doing some sort of industrial training and there's very specific safety equipment that people are wearing, you should be thinking about how you're going to either superimpose that on there if it's possible, or if you end up in that astronaut or crazy safety equipment sort of topic, I would go the illustrated route and look for ones that are you'll be able to support yourself, right? So that could be through illustrations that you can break apart the clip art and mix and match things, or if you have a custom illustrator, awesome. Most people don't have access to that. Or if you have no ability to get assets, draw stick figures. I mean, seriously, like
I know, right?
don't go down the path of picking a style that you can't support. That's where you get into trouble. Right? You get all the way there. Oh, I'm going to use these character cutouts. Oh, it worked great until these 5 scenes where they're wearing the wrong safety equipment, and now we're stuck. Anyway, that's my general take on that. Is go either way, but think about what you have access to and access to customize to make it work for the training situation you're building.
Totally agree. Like when we did Broken Coworker, which is just a scenario with videos in it. It's great. Everybody loved it, but we couldn't cut her hair for like, if we needed reshoots, then let's just say somebody had to have like their hair grow for a really long time, and then we could, anyway, it was terrible. It's completely unscalable, right? So that's one of the things I think it's a key point is what are you able to sustain over time? Because, if it is figures, then just be real with that, and honest, and then refine your stick figures.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about video there, because that's one of my concerns. I get people every once in a while asking like, oh, do have you considered doing video where you'll have them, now I'm confused and now I'm angry, and doing the video, but it's so much less flexible when you move to video. You're kind of stuck. When you have a still, there's some blending of what happens in it, but we can't record audio that's going to work for somebody who's training that way. By just sticking with still images, my feeling is it's the single most flexible way to visually tell a story with e-learning.
I agree. I remember, when was it? Years back, I think, was it Camtasia or what the heck? I don't know what I was working on, but they had all these assets where a person would like walk onto screen and be like, here's the thing. And I was like, okay, one, that's going to look old really fast, right? Because this, and also it doesn't, like, there's only 3 things that this person can do. So it really just, it was a novelty, but unscalable as
Totally.
well. Totally.
Yeah. It's the shiny new tool, and you're like, oh, this is cool. There's a person walking across the screen, but and ooh, I'm presenting. Yeah.
Or that, and I'm sure people are doing this still someplace, where you have that face of like a digital person and they follow your mouse with their eyes. Have you ever had that?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are things that we've tried. And the one thing that I know for sure is that every single time I've used eLearningArt, the resources, like, they're timeless. They really are. And it's awesome because you can go back and get more of the same if you really want to augment something or just swap them out. So thanks.
Yeah, it's funny. I would say almost timeless. It's funny because I've been doing, now it's 10 years in, coming up on 10 years. And I look back at some of those first few sets, though, you start to see that the haircuts start to look a little dated and the clothes look a little dated, like baggier pants 10 years ago. And now it's like the slim jeans look and all of that.
That's totally regional.
It's a never ending process.
It is.
Here's the advantage. If you want to do some retro training, you can go back to the images from 10 years ago and you can have people who look a little dated, which is cool. But it's a never ending process, right? I mean, I have a whole matrix of diversity, like with business casual. So that's the other thing, going back to stock photos. 10 years ago, if you wanted to find stock photos of somebody in business casual, everyone was in a suit and they were a model. Like it was impossible. Yes. So most people are wearing business casual. That's the deal. Or now even casual. Very few people are going to work in suits. So having business casual is the deepest one. And I think I just finished a few months ago my master matrix thing that's like Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, other, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60 plus, male, female. I think you end up with 60 something characters. Now I'm having to go back to those first characters, right? I want to check the box on all of those. So you can say, when you're building a scenario, you can say, what I really want in business casual, I want an Asian woman in her 30s, and I want a white male in his 20s, and here's the scene that they're having, and they're in the conference room. So that you can now, on that whole matrix, you can fill that out. Now I'm going back to the original early photo shoots and reshooting those categories, and with everything, like trying to build out diversity within character sets. But the good news is I'll be in business for a long time, because by the time I finish the whole matrix, it's time to start over again.
It's like having a giant lawn, right? You just keep on going. By the time you're finished mowing the lawn, you just got to go back, and I'll go back to the other side of the property.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or the Golden Gate Bridge. They never finish painting it. They go from one side to the other. When they finish, they go back to the other side and start repainting it again.
No way.
It's a very long process.
I didn't know that. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, it looks good. I appreciate the work those people do.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I wanted to actually, maybe I can just share my screen right now, because I wanted to show people how I'm using your, well, I want to show your site and also how I'm using it, and hope you don't mind me showing.
Yeah. No, please do.
Okay, here we go. All right. So we've got, and by the way, I love this. This is Ben. I love Ben. I use him a lot. He's pretty awesome. But what I wanted to show is just there's like, let's say if here's Alonda. Alonda's actually a lady I use a lot too. You know why? She's got this amazing nuanced face. Like, going from this kind of face to this kind of face is quite fantastic. So what this is, I guess, is just it's a repository of Alonda in, I believe she's on the phone and all of
Yep.
these. So this is great for customer service training. But I think one of the things that's awesome is that you can still get, like, if you're deciding or you want to see all the poses, you have this PDF preview, right? Which is gives you an overview of all of the poses that are in this set.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And then, so what's cool too is when you do click on an individual character, you get this option of how big you want the download to be, which is just, let's just say that they almost come out life size here. It's just crazy. You got to be
Yeah, they're
careful
big.
with your download.
Yeah, all the new ones are like 5,000 pixels tall, which is pretty big.
Pretty
But
HD.
it's nice being able to size it within this is great. So you're not having to open up Photoshop, or you're not ending up with like whatever, it could be Articulate or PowerPoint or wherever you're putting them, not ending up with a massive file size that's unmanageable.
I never actually want to open up Photoshop ever, but I love the fact that
Yeah,
here's her,
me either.
and then there's just a little difference, and it makes a huge difference. So, I mean, I've used Asha in these are my courses, and I just use her because she's just she's business professional, fantastic. But I'll use these to actually just share what I think people are thinking, and then augment my presentations with what you're doing. So I don't just use it for e-learning. I actually use it for my courses, like the presentations of my courses. But I did.
Oh, awesome.
I did want to show. This is. It's probably going to be. Can I turn?
I've seen this one. I love this one.
Yeah. So what's fantastic is that, and you probably, you do this, and we can talk about this. I was going to ask you about your, definitely about your process, right? Like, as far as the advice for a novice instructional designer, the small one-person learning department who really wants to make a difference and be proud of their work, what do you suggest that they do?
Sure. And I think it starts with trying to solve problems, trying to help people. And so, and instead of thinking, I think sometimes as instructional designers, we get stuck in the mindset of we should create a course for everything. And often that's not what we should be doing.
What do you mean?
Sorry.
I'm being serious. What do you mean?
But right, I mean, I think that what we talked about before with like software training, like that's terrible. Having to go through like hours and hours of here are all the features, and now I'm clicking on this, I'm clicking on that, and nobody's going to retain anything. Anyway, what somebody might be looking for is, it could be something that's built into the software, like a tooltip. It could be that you've created, it could be that you have a help, or not a help desk, a knowledge base where they can go if they need something, and you build out and you have those resources, but you don't force them all through this course. You build resources that are going to help people. And with software, it's probably more, those are performance support solutions, right? So I think it's first talking to people, figuring out where they're having problems, and figuring out the quickest way to solve those problems. And there's easy ways to do them that are non-course solutions. And that's one with software training. And like onboarding, I like using something that actually you just participated in for me, that's more on like the content and marketing side, where I asked a bunch of different scenario experts like what their number one tip was for building scenarios. I compile all that information. It turns into this expert roundup post. There's no reason you can't do that at your company for onboarding as well. And let's say you're training new salespeople, right? So interview all the top salespeople, a couple of the executives. Like, what's your number one tip for a rep that's just getting started in the XYZ company doing this role? Mm-hmm. And you just now you have a series of tips. And by the way, that helps on onboarding to get a sense of like who the leadership is, what's working, what's not working. Like everyone's going to share a different tip. And you don't have to push that out as a course either. You could think more like a marketer, and you could do a drip campaign. So they start and like once a day, Monday through Friday, they're getting one tip for 2 weeks. And that was 10 tips that they got from 10 of your top salespeople. And that's very different than a course-based sales training solution. And by the way, you can do that so fast. right? I mean, it's really quick to create something like
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that I want to unpack. Okay.
that. Sure.
So you said retention. You mentioned retention. So when you think about that, if you could give somebody strategies on how to improve retention, what would you say? And I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but what are your
What? So retention through training?
yeah, like or you just said, drip campaign, which basically means
Or
what are you thinking there?
yeah. So that's on the onboarding front, is to rethink onboarding. Um, I think that obviously as somebody feels like they're growing their skills, and also if they're liking their boss, that's that's the reason from a retention standpoint they're going to stick around. I think that's number one. People there was some LinkedIn interview that came out in the last week that's the number one reason people leave their jobs
They don't
is
like their boss?
they don't like their boss.
It's all
Um,
relationships. It really has so much to do with that.
Yeah, but and if you look at, I think sales training is a good example on the retention side. There tends to be, you have all these commission, a lot of comp being based on commission, and the strategy sometimes is let's hire a bunch of salespeople, and then the cream of the crop will survive and everyone else will fail. That's hugely expensive for a company, and it's a terrible experience for a person coming on board. So, is there some stuff that you can do in the onboarding process that helps people be more successful? And to think about how you can help them, not how do you throw them into the fire and see who survives.
Yeah.
Uh,
You
um,
mentioned, sorry,
okay,
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So you mentioned this idea, and I really am a huge proponent of it because I'm seeing a lot of companies. I'm seeing a lot of companies outsource um, their knowledge, not knowledge, but like not to say it's wrong, but there's companies who are now relying exclusively on exterior databases for sources instead of also realizing that there's a lot of in-house expertise and there's top performers that are there that are not getting tapped into. And for me to figure out what those people are thinking, what are they doing differently, that's contributing to that. I think that's a wicked idea, and I'm a huge proponent of that. So,
I think it's
uh,
about asking for that. I think it's about asking a manageable. I have an article on it. I'll give that to you after, so you can put it in the show notes. But
yeah,
I call it a Goldilocks question when you're picking these expert roundup questions. Like, you don't
yeah,
want something so short that it's a yes or no answer. Like, that's not interesting at all. But you
yeah.
also can't be like, tell me about the sales process,
Oh
where it's
gosh,
like they
yeah,
could talk for an hour about it. You want something that's in between, that's specific enough that points them towards a short answer that they can give. And they can answer it in a couple different ways. A lot of my expert roundup posts, all of my current expert roundup posts turn into a blog post. It's all text based. I email the question, I get it back. But guess what? Everyone has a smartphone. So you can go ask that question and it doesn't need to be professional. Just shoot it. Ask the question. What's your number one tip for new salespeople doing X? Boom.
yeah,
Record it. 30-second video.
yes,
Wow. Fastest e-learning you ever created, and probably more helpful than a lot of the stuff that's out there too.
right, yeah. So relevant and contextual, and
Yep.
from a real person. Really cool.
Yep.
That's awesome. That's an awesome idea, and I think more people should be doing that. It's kind of funny because I think um, also like when it comes to like the work that we do even as developers, right? Like I'll have companies look at my stuff and they're like, yeah, that's so progressive. We love that the video, like, and yeah, we just shot it like with our iPhone right in our out of our pocket.
Yeah.
That's cool. We put it up someplace. But then I hear from the people who are in those companies and they're trying to do that stuff. And they're like, no, we got to need 18 months for planning. And then we're
Yeah.
going to be, so they're hitting this wall because they're already in it. And it's almost like, how do you, how do you do that? What do you suggest? Like, let's say I'm in a place where it's extremely conservative and the outside is seen as like where the innovation happens, and I'm here. How do I affect that change? What do you suggest?
I think it's do something small and don't go. from a video standpoint, I think there's two different paths you go down. You either go down this is going to be super professional and polished, and we've got the pro lighting and the backdrops and the whatever. But with everyone doing all this like instant communication, Snapchat and this and that, there's an expectation that, I mean, I see professional marketing people, they're walking around doing with their selfie stick, like, and they're like walking down the neighborhood. So you can go the unprofessional path and it's totally okay now. Right? It's the real path, and that can connect with people. So it's just do something small. Mm-hmm. And then try to launch it and get some buy-in around that to show what can be done quickly.
Now, I want to hit on this this whole idea of doing something small, but also that maybe push a little bit in the direction that you're going, because you're running a portfolio training course, right?
Yep. And
so, okay, I want you to talk about that. However, the other thing I just want to preamble that with is I think that a lot of people wait for permission to develop their own professional portfolio. So tell me about what you're doing with the portfolio course, and then also tell me what you think about the resistances that you need. You know, I need my boss to be like, buy me that software, and I need my boss to be okay with me building something on my own. I'm afraid.
Yeah, sure. Well, on the portfolio side, I think the portfolio is probably the single most important thing somebody can do for their professional career, for advancing either within their company or looking at a new job, or also picking up client work on the side. We are in a visual and interactive field, and when a portfolio is asked for, if you don't have one, it's too late. So that's a big problem, and most people get hung up. It's a sucky thing to feel like the portfolio is always something that somebody's about to get work. They're going to start working on it soon, but yeah. But the problem is it's overwhelming, right? So there's a couple things. One is like in the portfolio class, and it's in the webinar, the free webinar that I do. I describe this process as well, but it's what I call the snapshot approach, which is this theory of creating your portfolio that's, here's all these projects that I've done. I'm going to take a snapshot of these projects. I'm going to put those together, and that's going to be my portfolio. But there's a whole bunch of problems with that. Like, one, you can't use anything. Most people can't get permission from their companies to share the corporate training that they've created. Whoops. Okay, that's kind of sucky. The other is it's not very strategic, right? So you're taking snapshots of something that was in the past. It might be too long. It's an hour-long course. So even if you could use it, it could be too long. Plus, you're not necessarily putting together the right mix of the points you're trying to show for the audience you're trying to attract. So it's the approach that I talk about is it's the upside-down portfolio approach, which is thinking first about what the employer is looking at and the types of employers that would be looking at things, and then building something that's for them. And it's interesting when you're talking about like how to structure a course. I didn't create a formal e-learning course for this, right? It's not a click this, do this. But it is a scenario. You're actually doing something, but a lot of it is in like Google Docs with instructions on how to do things. Yeah. We do weekly calls where people can ask questions and get feedback and give each other feedback. But it's working through something. And one of the questions that you had asked me before was like what kind of training I use myself. When it's something I'm trying to do, YouTube, and it's the same thing. I don't sit there and consume 4,000 hours of YouTube videos straight.
You don't?
If that's possible. But I go to YouTube when I'm looking for something specific to do. Yes. So changing my windshield wiper, or doing something in WordPress that I don't know how to do. Yeah. It's going there, and it is a scenario. It's combo. It's both performance support. I'm going to it at the time of need, but it's also scenario because I'm doing it along with it. So that's kind of like with the portfolio class that I teach. It's going that process of thinking through things together, building things together, but it's not packed with eLearningArt images or Articulate Storyline 360 courses. That's not what it is. It's about hands-on. It's about hands-on doing something, and so you can think more along those lines. Now, telling stories and building scenarios is great, but if the scenario in this case is actually building something or working in a test environment for the software that they're actually using, I mean, that's more effective than building a course around those things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's very, very cool approach. It's kind of neat because we, and almost it's the same approach. The portfolio is just like your resume. It's just like your cover letter, which is, it's really supposed to be like you have to, there has to be an intent behind it. You have to decide who is going to look at it and what they're supposed to get out of it. And I think that's, and the one of the things is, I mean, I talk to people all the time who they struggle with the fact that they don't have permission yet to.
yep.
My
That's
company.
that's almost everybody, by
Yeah.
the way.
Right.
And actually it's one of it's the thing that makes people feel terrible, and it's the big roadblock. But actually, you're better off not starting with what you already had. You're better off being strategic and building snippets of solutions. And I think the number one problem people make who already have portfolios is just posting a link to an example instead of using that as an opportunity to tell a story about what the business goals were, what your approach was, what your process is, and how you did. That's way more telling than having 50 examples. I'd rather have one write-up that walks me through the problem you were trying to solve, what your approach was, screenshots of the terrible mock-up that you built, and with stick figures before you apply the design. I think
Mhm.
that's more helpful. And for anyone who wants, on the eLearningArt.com/portfolio, I will always have links to portfolio resources. Right now, there's a landing page there, so they'll get notified. I'm teaching the course, the webinar next week, and that's a free webinar. And anyone who signs up for that, whenever, will get notified about when I'm doing the webinars.
So, and this is small intake, right? Like you're working quite closely with
Yeah.
your, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I cap the number of people in it because I can't manage. So there's two things. I have a paid course where you're working more hands-on with me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anyone can come do the webinar, and there's a ton of value in that webinar.
Yeah. It sounds
So
like it.
it's
Right.
like 45 minutes of teaching that's super useful, and then people who want to take it to the next level can. But there's certainly a ton of value just in the webinar as well.
That's awesome. And we'll put a link to that as well underneath the video so that people can check it out. Because I
Awesome.
really think this
Thanks.
is a wicked resource for anybody to have. And
I'm
start.
enjoying doing it a lot. It's fun working and helping people. I feel like I can make a big impact. I think it's one of the biggest ways I can make an impact in somebody's career is by helping in this process. So I'm enjoying that piece.
And it's funny because I think that a lot of the influence comes from, we're not necessarily an industry yet that fosters portfolio development. For artists, it's easy. For digital artists, it's easy. There's sites dedicated to portfolios for digital, for painters and all this stuff, right? Graphic
Yeah.
designers.
Well,
But
you run into problems too with internal versus external, right?
yeah,
Linking, if something was already published to the public, like linking to that as something that you designed is fine. It's hard when it was an internal course about something. Companies are just like, nope,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
not going to happen.
And then again, I mean, this gives you an opportunity to build the things you've always wanted. Like you don't need permission. Nobody needs to say okay. You can
Yep.
do what you want. And
Yep.
sometimes that's the best. So
Yep.
that's,
All
yeah.
right. So I didn't answer your second question with this because it was a two-part question, which was how people can kind of be looking good, doing a good job, just getting started, and how
Yeah.
they can use that. So I have a few tips for what I call designing e-learning like a pro. I think Tom Coleman from Articulate coined, I don't know if he coined it or if he found it from somewhere else, but I heard it from him first, which was the 5-minute expert, which is basically being 5 minutes ahead of whoever it is that you're teaching about something to. So if you're the one-man training department and you're about to go in to talk to a stakeholder or a subject matter expert, don't go in blind. Like spend a little bit of time and come up with, I have my own, you can call it a needs assessment, I guess, if you want to be more formal, but I'd say it's a mini needs assessment where I have a half-hour interview that I'm doing to gather as much information as I can. And I mix the questions. I'll delete some questions. If I'm talking to a stakeholder, It's going to
Yeah.
be a shorter meeting, and there's going to be more like business goal oriented. If I'm talking to a subject matter expert, I'm trying to uncover certain other things. And sometimes that's the same person, or sometimes it's a joint meeting. But so that 5-minute expert for that is like, if you could take the 5 minutes before your meeting and like structure what your questions are going to be when you go in there, I think that is a really helpful thing. It makes you seem more professional and organized. And the other, you and I have talked a bunch about, you call them frameworks, I call them instructional models, whatever, like having something in place for how you're going to approach whatever your solution is going to be. So if it's course based, is it some sort of scenario model? Is it going to be branching? Is it going to be a false branching? I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to go about it, but knowing what you can and can't build quickly, so you don't get yourself into trouble building this branching scenario that's going to like crush your soul, because every time you make a change, it takes 3 hours to troubleshoot changes, because you've built in all these custom variables and tracking and this and that. So tip number 3 would be learn to build a mockup really quickly. So I use PowerPoint as my main mockup tool. It
Yeah.
appears that there is interaction that's happening, but I just know I'll take a video of myself doing the PowerPoint, and it'll be a crude mockup. It won't be stylized or designed, but here's how the interaction would work. I'm going to drop some real text in there and show you, here was option 1, 2, 3, and 4 based on what they're, and then here's the custom feedback. But to the user, to the person watching the video or sitting in the live demo, it looks like I've built in all this interaction, when really I just know the order that if I clicked anywhere on the slide, it takes you to the next slide. I just know the order I'm clicking on, and it feels like it's interactive. So, but having something like that so you can fail quickly and get feedback quickly, because it sucks to go out there and spend like days building some sort of course and getting it all styled, putting it together. From the simplest thing, like they just wanted to change the style, where you're like, oh, I have to rebuild the entire thing. Or nope, I don't like the way you're doing this interaction. This is not how we're doing it. So to build that mock-up and get a little bit of either buy-in and then some direction with where you're going, or nope, this isn't going to work, and change it. So I think I do that for everything that I create, and I try to build. And I don't mean a mock-up that you're building in a week. I mean a mock-up that you're building in an hour. Like, what can you build right now and get in front of somebody? And then my 4th tip for designing like a pro is more on the graphic side. Like it's having those, like we talked about, having styles that you know that you can design in for the stuff that you're building. It can be design treatments, so it could be cutout characters. It could be illustrations if you have access to more of those illustrations or the ability to break those apart. And hopefully you have access to some resources. Or if it's character cutouts, there's a zillion ways to stylize a photo. You can create a scrapbook effect. You can do like what you did, makes it more like a comic book, that example that you had pulled up, using real photos, but divvying up the screen so that it has that design treatment going in there. And I will build my mockup with the previous tip, I'll build my mockup with no style. Because you drop a character in there, and now you have a 10-minute discussion about, was that the right character, when that's not your point on your mock-up. You're just trying to say, from the interaction standpoint, does this work? And then you know those styles, and you can show them, here are the 6 styles. 3 of them are photo based and 3 of them are illustration based. I can style any course like this. So I think with those 4 things, somebody who's just getting started is going to look pro. So it's it's having that process, being like the 5-minute expert, building that stuff out there, having instructional models and frameworks that that you can build in, building mock-ups really quickly, and then having designs that you can support. So those are my 4 tips for somebody that's getting started and wants to be doing a better job.
Those are solid. Thank you. Wow. I like
you.
this, like the idea of failing fast. And my goodness, once I used like the wrong image of a too sexy a nurse, and it like took up like 30 minutes of my
yes
hour that I had with subject matter experts. It just, you really have to be so about what you
a room full of stakeholders and subject matter experts will argue about the photo that you picked and put on the screen for forever.
So yeah, you really got to be so careful. And I mean, the idea of not attaching yourself to your designs, because the more time you invest, the more invested you are, and the more personally you take it when somebody doesn't love what you just created, your baby, right? You got to like let go of those darlings and be okay. Like just quick. because
On the
you can't
yeah,
help that, right? Yeah.
and on that design side, I think that's something that somebody needs to be thinking through ahead of time. Like, what resources do I have access to? And if I have no resources, here's what I can do with no resources. And really, it might just be the stick figure, something or other. But just like, this is what I can build without resources. If you want different styles, I need resources, but this is what I can build.
Yeah.
Um,
And even in some places, like I'm really fine with just having a really good context and one or two people and like no design. It's almost in the end that quick and dirty even will work. So
yeah,
I think if you have to be honest with you, I think that there's so much that can be done with just people cutouts
yeah,
alone. You don't even need a floor; they can float. I mean, really, if they have the right expression, so much can be accomplished.
yeah. No, I've
Um,
seen so Ray Jimenez with vignettes. You're probably familiar with some of the stuff that he's done, but he does a lot
oh
of
yeah,
these mini scenarios, and the style he often uses is no background. It's like it's people from like the waist up having conversations, and then a question either at the end or inserted somewhere in the middle there that's providing the interaction. And he does these little mini scenarios that are it's trying to find those nuanced problems that somebody might run into in a work environment, and telling that through a story, and then making somebody make a choice, which I guess turns that story into a scenario essentially.
yeah. Okay, so I have so many more questions for you, and I know I can't
do
answer all of them.
you
All
want
right.
faster answers? Are we running out of time?
No, no, no,
We can do quick fire if you want.
no. It's cool. As far as because I think there's a lot of people who are entering this kind of like you said, the accidental way, right?
Yep.
How what do you think are the skills that they should the fundamental knowledge or skills or and attitude that they need to be able to succeed in this industry?
I, I think it's about helping first. It's about trying to help people do their job better. And if you have that as the goal, and then figure out what the solution is, not be set on that course. So that's going to involve asking questions, right, and listening, and then trying to help, and in determining what that solution is after you've had those conversations.
So okay, so I think one of the things that people are scared of is, especially when you're new or just getting into the field, is that if you ask too many questions, you'll look like you don't know what you're talking about or unsure of yourself. What do you think about that? What do you say to those people?
Well, there certainly is a spectrum. A friend of mine, a friend of mine. So I think asking questions is good, but again, if you're thinking through, like before going to the stakeholder meeting or the subject matter interview, if you think through what those questions are first, and you can even go in there with your sheet that's trying to get to certain information. I have a friend who works in sales, and he was giving the analogy of a train on a track where in front of you the track is being built, and then behind you the track is falling. And with sales, with questions, if you're trying to uncover information from a potential customer, if you don't ask any questions, you're in trouble. You're not going to be able to solve their problem.
The
But if you
track falls
start
away.
but if you're asking too many questions that moves you into they're educating you about the industry, like, oh, tell me about, then that's also going to hurt. So you need to stay on that track in the right zone. But generally, I think thinking through those questions first is a way to go, and because that can keep you on track, so you're not asking bad questions. Not that it's a bad question necessarily, but not asking questions that aren't uncovering what a better solution might be. Yeah, I think that's what my approach would be.
I like it.
And maybe don't start your first interview with the CEO. Maybe
Why
do your first.
not?
Yeah,
Warm up a little first, right? Yeah.
yeah, right.
Cool. All right. So, okay. I'm just going to choose which one I'm going to ask you next. Okay. So, most people are still skeptical of online learning. They think that there's nothing that replaces face to face. What would you say to those people?
I would say, based on their experience that they've had with it, they're probably right with what they have experienced, and that's because most people's only only experience with e-learning is compliance training.
Mhm.
And compliance training generally is not put together to help somebody do something. It's not put together to help them do their job better. It's mostly a legal checkbox. And because of that, nobody has spent time building good training. They've spent enough to check the box. And so everyone thinks about, oh, I got to do that annual terrible compliance training on X. Oh, and it's the same one I did last year and the year before and the year before. So that's a really bad introduction into what e-learning can be. People who say that you can't replace what you're doing face-to-face. Face-to-face has advantages, certainly, but a lot of that can be replaced. And face-to-face also has its own problems. One, it's hugely expensive if you're having to fly people in. It's only based on a certain time. Like, okay, we're doing this training in 2 weeks in Orlando, and it's going to be the whole team. It doesn't scale well from a cost or time standpoint. And then just from a general learning standpoint, most of the time you're not having a personalized experience where somebody is getting to do something, make a choice, be challenged, and get feedback based on the choice that they have selected. Now, there's a little bit of that good live or instructor-led classes can have where that teacher, that facilitator can pull that information out by asking questions and getting feedback. But a lot of times you just have the talking head up there that's like pushing content at the speed of the lowest learner.
Mhm.
And that's not a great experience either. So e-learning has an opportunity um, to solve a lot of those problems and enhance the training when done well. If you're looking at scenario-based training that somebody can do, and not a scenario on everything, but let's look at the key problems. Let's look at the couple of the most common problems and then high impact areas, and let's run them through 3 scenarios that are short and they're drawing on information that's in a manual instead of let's have an instructor-led thing where we all walk through the manual together or go read this manual on everything. Like that's not very effective. And then people are making those choices, getting to experience failure or success on their own and get feedback based on what they're doing. I mean, that's the best of e-learning is helping people do things and testing them, walking them through that process of doing something and relying on other resources.
There's that idea of that personalization. I mean, we've been looking for it for such a long time, and this is it. Like you really can personalize that experience to my skill set if you want to, right?
Yep.
How much or how little support I need depending on the decisions I make. So,
Yeah,
and I think
it's not all there yet. There's more going on in the
no.
education space, and then there's yeah, it's not all perfect. But even at the most basic level of let's say you're trying to teach both an expert and a novice at the same time, there's an opportunity for branching at the beginning,
Mhm.
where they're either testing out or they can be on a faster path than the person who's getting things wrong and getting having to go down a course that has more teaching, more scenarios, more whatever. But you're not forcing somebody who is that expert to go through all the novice stuff as well. And that is a piece of personalization. It can be more personalized than that, but it's in its simplest form. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah. What's your favorite resource for personal learning? Like you, not
Yeah. So it's a mix, but if it's me trying to do something, it's often YouTube
yeah.
to solve that one problem that I'm trying to do right now. I will oftentimes I'll do business coaching stuff as well if it's something related to business where I can get some experience from somebody else, and oftentimes for some of that stuff, same thing actually with my portfolio class. Some of it is the education piece, but some of it is also accountability. Right.
Mm.
So if there's a specific thing that you're trying to do, being part of a cohort that's going through it together and feeling like you have committed to do certain things, having that coaching stuff can be helpful. So I like that as well. Yeah, those are my key ways of learning right now.
Yeah, I think it was just recently that I actually also discovered mentors that
Yep.
somebody can really just put something uh, it's weird how I actually thought I could learn a lot of things by myself, but then joining a peer group where you're kind of like the newest person and everybody else has like this combined experience, it's the next level as far as I'm concerned. Accountability, huge, right? It
Yeah.
just totally different because you can really mess with yourself as far as like, oh, I'll put this off, and there's just, it's different when you have to tell somebody why you didn't get something done. It's because you didn't want to, or felt you didn't feel well that day, and there's no excuses. So it's actually that aspect of it is awesome.
Totally. I mean, it's interesting though. It's like both of those are things that we have chosen to do, which is sometimes the opposite of what is being dictated from, say, a training department. This is what people need to learn, instead of this is what you and I are choosing to do those things because it will help us do our job better. Doing mentoring, doing coaching programs, doing whatever, going to YouTube because I need that thing. So if there's an opportunity for somebody who's building training to think, all right, you don't even have to think. It can involve no thinking. Ask questions about what people would like as resources, what would help them do their job better. That's better than sitting up in your castle creating course after course that you're churning out and pushing down on everybody in the organization.
Totally true. Okay, so what are some good examples of people and faces being used well? And you already mentioned Ray
Yeah.
Jimenez doing that. And he is,
Yeah.
I
I think,
follow him. He's fabulous. He's a fabulous human
yeah.
being. Also, he has his strategies for storytelling integration is fantastic. Just
Yeah.
brilliant.
I love it. His stuff almost feels, even though it's not video,
Hmm.
he builds stuff in sequences, stories in an interesting way.
Yeah.
That I think's pretty cool. Um, I'm trying to think back to, I love the stuff that you guys are doing. Like the example you were showing with people, and some of the other examples I've seen are pretty awesome. Um,
Most of the stuff I've done is, like you said, behind closed doors. Like it's like, oh,
yeah,
I have some awesome nuance where I use the images of people to show emotion without giving feedback, actually explicit words. Yeah, that's hidden.
yeah. I think back in the day, this was might have been like 8 years ago. It was one of the early pre-articulate storyline. One of the Guru winners, Dave Richards, had done a really interesting, I think it was like EMT training or something or other, where he did a really cool job of evoking emotion through pictures of people, sound. That was pretty neat too. But there's opportunities to use those facial expressions to tell stories, and I think that's really the best use of pictures of people and faces. It's the storytelling aspect and the scenarios where you're using that as actually telling a story as
Yeah.
well through facial expressions.
I actually also heard, and this is from Michael Allen, because if you look at a lot of his stuff, he's also a scenario, obviously, proponent and has
Mhm.
a framework. But it's funny, I've seen some of his stuff where they're just multiple choice questions, but he'll put in a picture of a face, because he said we're creatures, we're animals, and we are always interested in looking at other faces. And so he'll put in a picture just to add that little bit of human context, even when it's not necessary, because it knows it draws attention, because we're always looking at eyes and things like that. And I never
Yeah,
thought about it that way, but it's really, actually, it's kind of funny how you can hack that biology
yeah.
aspect. Hey,
I think if there's a face on the screen, it's probably impossible not to look at it and read it. I mean, that's it was part of survival, right? That we needed to be able to do that.
yeah, it's kind of a cool hack, I think. So, all right, this a book, and I love learning this about people, because I'm always going back to like what I'm not making judgments, but I kind of am. So what's a book that you initially dismissed, but then suddenly it resonated later with you?
Sure. So people are going to dismiss it right now when I say the title, and that's why I dismissed it too. It's The 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. I'd say that book was the single most influential one in my career with the decisions that I made. But it's not. Tim Ferriss isn't about. It's a provocative title. It's not about working 4 hours a week, but that sounds pretty good too.
It does.
It's about being about ways to be more efficient, to focus on the things that matter. Um, yeah, so one of the big concepts there is the 80-20 rule, Pareto principle, where 20% of the inputs are going to lead to 80% of the outcomes. So you can focus you can focus on a smaller portion of things that are high impact instead of trying to do everything. That's a much more strategic approach than going after everything.
And you can apply that to every single aspect of everything, basically,
Yeah.
right? And just get
Yep.
the most out of your time. I love it. And even when you're designing anything, especially e-learning, if you are judicious with yourself and are able to do that, I think that we'd have way more time to produce great stuff because we would be just focusing on what actually drives the most value for people. So.
Yeah, I talk about 80-20. I mean, you can change the number too. Sometimes it's 90-10. It could be 95-5, whatever.
Yeah.
It's that ratio where it adds up to 100. But yeah, so when I'm looking at, if let's say somebody's trying to build, let's just say customer service training, and you'd say, okay, if you're trying to onboard somebody, well, probably you can look at call logs and figure out what are the most common things that people are having to deal with. Well, let's run people through something really quickly instead of on every possible thing that there could be. Let's run them through first. Let's start with the most common ones. Great. So you focused on probably only 10% of total calls or total topics make up 90% of total conversations that are happening in the call center. And then often I'll use that same principle again, but look at it from a problem standpoint. What are the most common problem calls? What are the 20% of the most common problem calls, and learn how to handle those? And then you can expand things, and you learn on the job, and you do all that. But if you can focus on the things that are going to be most common or most common problems, that's a better place to start than let me teach you everything.
Yeah. And build confidence, right? Like you are now, I mean, I know how to do this for sure. So that's a fantastic approach. So what was one of the most best or most impactful lessons that you've learned over your career and it's been 18
years. Getting old. It's getting a little gray here. There was a book that I read, I think it was Randy Kosmar, or I can't remember his name. He's a Stanford guy, but he talked about this concept of passion versus drive and push versus pull, and I really liked the definition. I think I might have even used that in my business school essay. That it's easy to try to focus on something that you're passionate about, and feeling passion is feeling pulled towards something. You can still be very successful and not be passionate and not feel the pull. Drive is the push, right? So you can work long hours and do a good job and do all that stuff, but from a personal well-being, like how you feel about what you're doing, the pull and the passion is going to be way more important. And by the way, that also leads to better outcomes. If you're loving what you're doing, you're doing it and you're loving it and you're doing a good job. And that, I think that's the more likely path to success than one of drive where you've hated it, but you've pushed yourself through it. What does success look like at the end of that? If you're still not liking it at the end, you've just been pushing yourself through it instead of really feeling drawn towards it.
Yeah. Well, you don't develop mastery in things that you don't enjoy, right? At least feel a pull. I think like there's this balance between, how people are like, oh, I don't know what I'm passionate about. I'm like, well, what do you like to do now? What do you want to get good at, right? And the more of that good at you get, the more you enjoy what you're doing because you're masterful, and just kind of snowballs. Yeah. It sounds a little bit like the Daniel Pink autonomy. What motivates you really, even when you work for other people. There's a bit of an overlap there, a little bit. Probably not. I haven't heard of the author you're talking about, actually.
I can put it in the. I think it was called The Monk and the Riddle was the book. It just came to me.
That's cool. I haven't heard of it. I love when people tell me about things I haven't heard of before. It's like add it to my reading list. Okay.
So Randy Komisar. So The Monk and the Riddle.
The Monk and the Riddle. I have not heard of it.
The Monk and the Riddle, The Art of Creating a Life While Making a Living.
Hey, that's fabulous. Awesome. Everybody add it to your reading list. That's fantastic. We finally got some new books because everybody, we were getting the same 4 books over and over. We're like, read
Good.
This and right. It's like whatever's the bestseller and everything by Malcolm Gladwell.
Yep. I think I have every Daniel Pink book under my desk here. Let's see.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have all
I think
the
these are these them? Let's see.
yeah,
Yeah, that
yep,
one's, this one is Daniel Pink.
yep,
Daniel Pink.
yep.
Daniel, this is his most famous one, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. A whole new
Well,
mind about creatives. And then this is like a job one. By the way, check it out. We were talking about stick figures and comics and cartoons. The entire book is in comic format.
see,
Did you know that? Did you know he
no,
had one like that? Yeah,
I
that's
did
pretty
not. I did not. See, that's totally awesome. I see the man is a genius.
cool.
No, I actually, I think, yeah, what happened to me is I just watched his TED talk and I was like, I got to read everything this man's putting out because it was,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
okay. So now, and thanks for spending time with me. That was totally
Sure. My
awesome.
pleasure.
So,
Thanks for
okay.
spending
So if
time with
somebody
me.
wants to get in touch, learn more,
Sure.
or
So,
I mean, you have all these. I think one of the things that you're offering right now is this awesome portfolio building course, and I hope it stays on forever because I know this is a resource. I've tried to hire people who have built their own things, and they need your help. So how?
great. Well, so if they're interested in the portfolio class, to just go to elearningart.com/portfolio. And then you and I talked about, so we're giving away some scenario conversation character cutout sort of things. If you go to elearningart.com/Anna.
That's
And,
awesome. I love any website that has a N and A.
and actually, and so both of those will put people on, there's the newsletter list. So there's not, and that's a good way to stay in touch with what I'm up to. People who want to connect with me on LinkedIn, anyone in the e-learning corporate training presentation space, I am happy to connect on LinkedIn. You can send an email to Bryan, BRYAN, at eLearningArt.com, but beware, the current count of unread emails is approaching 20,000.
Are
So
you like looking like milestones? You're like, okay, let's get it to 30.
no, I hate it. I hate it. But actually, so in all seriousness, though, if it's something that needs a business response, also copy support@elearningart.com, because that goes to a help desk where the support team actually answers those questions too. And I am on that, and things get escalated to me that are important. So I may have just given a
So you
secret for how people can
decide.
hack to get into this. Yeah,
That's funny.
19,457 unread Gmails in my work email, and about the same in my personal.
Archive it
I'm
all.
not. I already declared bankruptcy and archived everything, and that was about 2 years ago. The problem is I have so many different notification emails that come in. It's become almost unmanageable. So
You got to
I hope
80/20 that, 95/5, 95/5 that.
that's right.
It's kind of cool. Okay, so the other thing is that, and this is something that I subscribe to every year, which is that people can join eLearning Art as it's a membership site, right? So
Yep.
you have access to all of those resources, and I mean, so getting on a newsletter is fantastic because you actually
Sure.
have really great articles that you send out.
Thank you.
I'm on the list, people. Um, and um, and what I really like is that you source people for specific questions, like we talked about. You
Mhm.
source experts, and then you kind of distill that. You curate the best for people, which is wonderful. I think that's one of
Thank you.
the biggest things is knowing how to ask great questions. So, and you do that. It's
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank you.
And so there's you can actually subscribe to the newsletter, but also you can go straight to eLearning Art and actually sign up to have access to the full repository. And you don't just have cutouts, like you have cutout people, you have backgrounds, you have illustrations. I think you have hands. Do you have hands?
Yep. Have hands. That's hands are
Hands
always
are important. People don't
they're a
know.
good they're a good filler, right? When you want to show something happening, a document moving, whatever. Yeah,
I
totally.
have actually.
Yeah.
So
Um,
it's a lot of awesome resources, and I think you definitely want to start with a plan and then go there to see what be inspired by all the other things that that are happening. So
yeah, and I'd say somebody who's looking to just get started, signing up for the newsletter that comes with the free account, that you go into the eLearningArt.com/Anna, or you can just go into the homepage. You can get a sense for what the cutouts can be, and you can browse the library in that view. And people who are finding that they have a need for more stuff, they can do a paid plan. And I think the coolest thing I always hated with stock photos, the per image price, or download restrictions, like, oh, I can download 5 images a month. Okay, great. When I have a project, I need 100 images. So so that's the difference, is everything that we have in the library is owned by us, and there's no royalties that we're having and tracking that we're having to deal with, paying out commissions to people. And that's a lot of the reason that the stock photos have that stuff, is it's complex. They have to do all those payouts. You have access to everything. So that's as a e-learning developer, I think and I try to price it in a way that there's a lot of people who have the individual plans that they're paying for it themselves, and to pay for it in such a way that people feel like they're getting so much value that's helping them at their job, even if their company isn't reimbursing them. So that's been something that I've been, since launch, tried to keep the price in the range that the individual could buy it, pay for it themselves, even if they can't get reimbursed, and have it not break the bank.
Oh, it's a no-brainer to get it, because you really should, after the first time you have a project, should be paid for, because that's how affordable it is. I got to be honest with you people. Like, this is, and also it's an investment. Like, I think when you have, like, when you have a scenario or something that you're putting together, and you have like a story with a consistent person, and it's not just the same lady the whole time, people notice those things. And so and the other thing is the flexibility of having, I've spent hours looking for the same person, or I've liked some, let's say a particular person in a set, and then I realize that there's limitations on that. So I have to look for a brand new person and maybe settle for somebody else, because I need more variety, or I need different faces.
Totally.
So
I've felt the pain. And the
the
other pain is
if
you find something on a stock photo site, and then you end up having to clip the background out yourself. I can't clip a background out to be high enough quality that is at the level that my team does it. I can't, like, trying to get the hair right, and I want it to show up good on both a white background and also a dark background, like all that stuff. There's a whole quality control process that my guys do. I have no idea how it's done. It's like magic, but it's all manually cut and run through a pretty gnarly quality control process now.
Yeah, so I feel like everybody should kind of go through that pain first, just to really see how valuable this. So go ahead, go out there, try and clip out your own background, try and find your own people, go for it. And then after 5 downloads, you'll be tearing your hair out, and it'll be a no-brainer. Cool. Okay. So, everything that we talked about today will be in either a link underneath the episode on the podcast, or a link underneath the YouTube video. And is there anything else, any other parting words you want to leave us with today, Bryan?
Oh gosh.
No pressure. You're like, you didn't include this in the script. What's going on?
Yeah. No, I think it's focus on helping people. And I think it's being that 5-minute expert in the things that you're doing. And that means just getting it's not total preparation, but getting a little bit prepared before you're going into these things. So be that building training, be that building your portfolio, but it's just being a little bit strategic in how you're approaching everything.
Yeah, that's true. It's so, the overwhelm is by trying to do too much. Just focus on being that 5 minutes ahead. I really like that. That'll be on my tombstone. Just 5 minutes ahead of y'all.
I wish I could coin it as my own, but it's not. So.
That's right. Tom Coleman stole it from somebody. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, sir.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you having me, and it's always nice to chat. Yeah,
not a problem. Thank you.